Hello everyone, welcome back to another live hangout here at Voice Essentials. I hope you are doing well on for many of you a Sunday, for some of us a Monday, and a special happy Father's Day to all those fathers out there from the UK, Canada, America. It's a funny thing because we don't have Father's Day here in Australia until September, having had Mother's Day back in the beginning of May. So thank you, Linda, for reminding me in the live chat that it is in fact Mother's Day in other parts of the world. If you're a father, I hope, did I just say Mother's Day? Father's Day. I hope that you are having a wonderful day if you're a dad. And I hope you spend some time with your dad if that's what you do. We are back here ready for another a great hangout. We've been having some tech difficulties, you know that, for those of you who watch the show regularly. But I am pleased to say that when the whole show fell apart last week due to tech details, I was able to then immediately do a pre-record with Dr. Kari Ragan, which I'm about to show you in a moment. 37 minutes, well worth the spend of your time coming up. I had such just such a wonderful chat with Dr. Kari, and it was really really good. So please stick around because it is going to be well worth your time, well worth your while. Before we do, just a couple of pieces of news. Next week is a studio break, so we're taking a week off, and then we'll be back for what is going to be a jam-packed term of live shows. I've already got our 4 special guests lined up. We're going to be having some names that have been on the show. So Dr. Shannon Coates, you all know Dr. Shannon. She has been on the show possibly more than anyone else other than myself. Dr. Shannon Coates is joining us. She'll be with us late August. Dr. Trineice Robinson, someone who else has been on the show. She's been on the show before. She's going to be coming on the show in September. Jess Baldwin she was on the show back in 2018, like quite some time ago, but I'm getting Jess back on. We're going to be talking with Jess about, well, I'm hoping to be talking with Jess about an album she's just recently released. I think sometimes it's all too easy to think of singing teachers as just being singing teachers. In fact, so many singing teachers are actively involved in their own performance careers, and so Jess has just recorded a brand new album, and I hope to talk to her about that. And then a brand new guest that we've never had on the show before is Meredith Colby. Now, Meredith is a leading researcher into brains and singing. And so I am really looking forward to having Meredith on. I actually, when I messaged her, I said, hey, Meredith, we've been friends on Facebook a long time, but we may not know each other anyway. So Meredith was very kind to accept an invitation to join us, and she'll be joining us on the 18th of July. So actually not that far away, about a month's time. So look, if you're not already, subscribe to the channel and hit the white bell icon, because that's going to remind you of when we do these live shows, when we go live, so that you never miss out on, you know, interacting. Of course, in between all of our special guests, the shows, we do Q&As where we answer, well, I answer, to the best of my knowledge, your questions. And so I hope you'll take an opportunity to subscribe to the channel. Such a big few months coming up, and I don't want you to miss any of it. But all that being said, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the interview that I did with Dr. Kari Ragan. We're going to play that now, and stick around at the end because I'll come back on after that just to sign off the show and say goodbye to everyone. But I hope you enjoy the show. Here we go.
Sound check. Check 1, check 2.
Hello, Kari. Thank you for joining me on today's show after we've just had some technical difficulties and we're following it up. We're just going to pre-record this thing. It's so good to have you join me on the show today.
It's so good to be here. Thank you.
And I'm so pleased that this is kind of happening with someone who knows the technical challenges of doing online things. So your patience is very much appreciated. But we're going to. I've been really looking forward to our chat today because, and I'll give. I want you to introduce yourself if you could in a moment. But I have been reading your book. Called A Systematic Approach to Voice, The Art of Studio Application. And it is fabulous. And so I'm looking forward to having a bit of a deep dive into that. But before we do, I wonder if you could tell us a bit about yourself and what you've been doing career-wise.
Well, goodness, I always hate this question.
It puts you on the spot, doesn't it?
It does. It does. So I definitely grew up in the land of classical singing and classical training, and have a bachelor's and master's degree from Indiana University, and then moved to Seattle, Washington, where I had always wanted to live. I'm from the state of Washington, but from the other side of the state. And to study with the great Ellen Fall. She was one of our most famous opera teachers here in the United States, head of Juilliard voice faculty. And so I studied with her for 20 years until she passed away at 90 years old. And during that time was out singing and performing, but also had started teaching when I was a freshman or a sophomore in college. So I've been teaching nearly 40 years now. And wow. Yeah, so singing and teaching, and then really dove, oh gosh, in my mid-30s, more fully into pedagogy. As I say in my book, Scott McCoy's book came out and really changed my life because it had, not that his was the only book that talked about these things, but it talked about pedagogy in a way that was approachable, in my opinion, and that didn't have a method attached to it. It had nothing to do with him. It was, here's the facts. So for people that don't know that book, Scott McCoy's Your Voice, an Inside View. He's in the 3rd edition at this point. And so reading that book just sucked me in. And inadvertently, I also started working with a medical team to rehabilitate singers with injured voices. And so that, of course, I had to take a very deep dive into anatomy and physiology and vocal health matters. So, yeah, so I've been teaching and singing. I haven't sung professionally for a few years now. I'm too busy teaching and publishing and doing all of those things, and very involved with the NATS organization and starting my own conference, on a multidisciplinary conference. So yes, that's probably enough information.
Yeah, you are a busy lady. And for those who are interested in the Scott McCoy books, I don't have the 3rd edition, but I've got the 1st and the 2nd, and they are wonderfully accessible texts, aren't they? But
yes.
but quite robust and dense with information,
yes.
Aren't they?
And as I said to Scott, I said, I feel like my book is part 2 of his book, right? I don't go into the depth of him or Vennard or Ingo Tiso or there are so many great people that have written in depth about voice science. I thought, I'm not going to try and do something much smarter people have done better than I ever could. But I've been teaching for nearly 40 years. So I thought that I might have some help in the application, which is what I am most interested. Yeah. I'm interested in the science, but I'm interested in it so that I can know more to facilitate better application.
I think one of the challenges for the modern teacher is there is so much research and so much understanding that is being supplied quite readily to the modern teacher. And it behoves us as modern singing teachers in the 21st century to avail ourselves of that constant flow of information. But the challenge, I think, facing teachers is to then bring that into a cohesive, accessible, well communicated flow so that a student is able to engage with that information in a manner that is practical, applicable, and this is what I do love about your text is you have managed to really map a way to apply all of this information that we have to hand. And I was saying to you in our pre-show chat that I'm learning so much from the text, but equally I found it wonderfully affirming because I too am a teacher that has always approached his teaching with a sense of system, and I've always stopped short of referring to myself as a methodologist because I am not. But I love this systematic approach to voice that you lay out. How did you come to, you know, write what I would refer to as an apologetic for that approach to teaching? Because it's not everyone's cup of tea as a teacher, is it?
Oh, that's interesting. I would love to know what. Tell me more. You're thinking about an apologetic.
Well, an apologetic, yeah, that's probably an overstatement. An apologetic is a in one sense a defense or a laying out of reasoning for why you do what you do.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Well, you know, the first line in the book is, "This is not a method." I did not want people to think of this as a method. It is simply an approach, a systematic approach. It's a way that I have found it to be useful to work with singers, and I work with singers of all levels because of my injured singer work. So I have a lot of contemporary singers that don't have training that end up in vocal health challenges and come to my studio. So I have to be able to talk with them. And then the bulk of my studio are professional singers, right? Also. And so I have this interesting continuum of singers that I work with. And I guess to answer your question, how I came up with it, I can't take credit for anything. It was more of, when you look at the books for centuries for pedagogy, in some form, they all fall into these systems, right? We're talking about respiration, phonation, registration, articulation, and resonance. That ends up in some fashion in most people's books on voice pedagogy. And so as I was teaching, and again, I think probably especially working with singers with injuries, I would have a diagnosis and I would have to provide a singing evaluation, and I would be listening and getting visual cues as well, and audible cues, thinking, all right, what am I hearing in the respiration system and phonation? And actually, to give credit to Karen Wicklund, one of my mentors as an SVS, she has a intake singing evaluation form that is mapped out in this fashion as well. So I probably got it from that as well. And I just realized that as I was teaching, that was what I was doing, was listening for those cues. And then I would start to talk to the student in that fashion. And then the last thing I'll say about that is, I found I teach a lot of other teachers, and they all reported to me over and over how that profoundly changed their teaching when they started thinking about this systematic approach.
Yeah.
And so I just thought it might be helpful to others to, now, of course, when we have really advanced students, or we have students that have been with us a long time, we don't as readily break it down. At some point it becomes, we can use imagery, or, right, it becomes these systems in totality. But I do think, especially when we're first working with singers, it can provide a really nice roadmap.
I love that term roadmap, because I think we certainly when I have a new student come in, I don't want to take for granted that they come in with no knowledge, and I don't want to take for granted that they come in with a lot of knowledge. I also want to approach it with this understanding that I'm not going to be the be all and end all for this particular singer. I am simply going to be a part of their journey, and therefore I get to, take them along a pathway that I have trod out over many years of teaching, and that just happens to be a rather systematic approach. But like you say, that when I started to teach that way, it revolutionized the value, I guess, of education that I was delivering. Is that part of your approach? Is that sort of real educational delivery?
Yeah. Well, yes. And I think that always as teachers, we assess our teaching hopefully by the experience of our singers and the feedback of our singers. And so I found that, again, no matter what level my singer was, if I would say to them, okay, so I'm hearing this, so let's enter into a vocal task through the respiration system and live here for a minute. And I found that they could go home and practice with more efficiency and more understanding, rather than how I at times was taught, where a teacher would just simply have you, they would tell you how to do something differently, and you would go about and try, and you would remember it. But there was nothing, I don't know what the word is, concrete for me to go home and have a practice template. And I think my teacher, Ellen Fall, who was a pre-science teacher, but very famous here in the States and produced many famous opera singers and was a brilliant teacher. And she didn't have a systematic approach, but she used a lot of vocal tasks, wine corks, different tools. And so I realized when I would go home and practice, I would have something concrete to try and repeat what I had done with her in the lesson. And so I think the systematic approach helps with that as well.
Yeah, I find that there's a lot of value in that for my students also, is this ability to take more than just learning songs home, but that they're actually able to influence the development of their voice through more than just, learning some new songs. So yeah, that's an interesting part of it. I wonder if we could, because you were kind enough to bring my attention to a paper that you wrote back in, was it 2018? And I know that you've written some further papers with others, but I want to turn our attention, and this is in keeping with the book in many respects. The name of the article, just I'll put it up there, is, and this is from the Journal of Singing, everyone, defining evidence-based voice pedagogy, a new framework. So something, it's terminology I've used here on the channel before, evidence-based voice pedagogy. Talk us through a bit of that and how you came to be really exploring the idea of evidence-based.
Yeah. Well, I love talking about EBVP for many reasons. I think how it came to me was I kept seeing on social media, Facebook in particular, people using this term evidence-based. And I was actually at my own conference, multidisciplinary conference, and a speech language pathologist did a presentation talking about evidence-based practice and evidence-based medicine. And when you look at EBM and EBP, you see these three clearly defined circles of what makes up evidence-based medicine. And I thought, well, because I collaborate with the medical teams a lot, I thought, well, why isn't evidence-based voice pedagogy a term that's being tossed about with no meaning? Why are we not modeling a similar framework? It just seemed so obvious. I couldn't believe nobody had done it yet. And so I was getting ready to present at a Vennard conference at USC, and was asked to do, they wanted all of us to present something. They wanted it to be historical. I thought, well, that's a lot of pressure. But literally one day, as I was working on that presentation, it just hit me. I had goosebumps because I thought, wow, we need to be defining evidence-based voice pedagogy. And I think what was so significant about EBM is that it's not just about research. It is, the client's needs, the patient's needs in that case, and the doctor's experience in the clinic. And so I thought, well, my goodness, here is a framework for us that says, yes, voice research, because the point of that presentation was to say, if you are teaching in the 21st century and don't understand anatomy and physiology, I believe that you should not be teaching. That is my extreme bias. I think I've been teaching 40 years, so I come from a time where we wouldn't have known that. I was a person who, this is the great irony of my life, I've shared this story many times, who heard about Richard Miller and thought, oh, he's that science guy, right? I don't need to know that stuff. I think that's so ironic. So anyway, I just thought, wow, we need to be talking about EBVP in the same framework. And so that's where I set about defining each of the tripartite components of EBVP. And it is on my website. The article can be found on my website, kariragan.com. And I want to give credit to my 3 colleagues who have since helped me expand each one of the components: Lynn Maxfield, Lynn Helding, and Ken Bozeman. And I know Ken has been on your program, probably the other Lynn's as well. And so they helped me expand each one of the components. So there are now 4 articles attached.
Yeah. Yeah. And I haven't had the opportunity to read the other articles as yet, but I intend to, because I find this subject so interesting, because I too hold a pretty strong bias around our I think our responsibility as modern singing teachers to have a fairly well-developed and mature understanding of anatomy, biology, and the growing understanding around acoustics and resonance.
Cognition.
Yeah. What I particularly liked about having read your initial article, the genesis of this discussion, was the honoring, I guess, of historical understandings. It's something in my world of contemporary voice teaching that we have run, unfortunately, into a space where there tends to be a temptation, let's put it that way, to want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, to want to disregard all of that which has come before because, well, we're contemporary singers and singing teachers and we've got a new way. And I'm a great believer in the fact that if you want to learn to sing contemporary voice, then you need to develop contemporary technique. However, I'm also very keen to appreciate that we stand on the shoulders of those who've gone before us, and some amazing pedagogues where the information of the Richard Millers, for example, who I often reference in my materials, all feed into what we as contemporary singers do. Is that something that you were conscious of when you were writing the article and beginning that process?
Yeah, there was a couple things that I was very conscious of. Originally, because I was writing a very stern paper about calling voice teachers in the 21st century to understand basics of anatomy, physiology, acoustics, cognition of the voice as it applies to the genres of their students. And the tone of it, I was nervous would be off-putting to a lot of very famous, wonderful teachers, none of whom will ever read this article, but that I didn't want to. There are incredible teachers out there at Indiana University, for example, at some of our top universities that have never taken a PED class and are producing some of our top opera singers in the world, right? So I didn't want them to feel lectured to. right? And I wanted to acknowledge, and that's where the three components are so critical. And that's where the EBM light bulb went off for me, that voice research is a component, but wait, if you're a teacher who lives more in imagery and more historical pedagogy, that is the teacher experience and expertise. That component you are in top form on. And then of course the third component being the student goals and perspectives, because I again was raised in a world where you shut up and did what your teacher told you to do. You didn't ask questions. Our needs were not taken into account. They were trying to prepare us for a big, bad, not very kind world of opera.
Yeah.
So they were very, very tough on us. And so now we know that it's really critical to take the student goals and perspectives into account to facilitate more effective learning.
Sorry, no, you go.
No, I was just going to say, so I don't even know that I answered your question, was really about the contemporary, because then there is also, we have this, in the opera world, we have the professional opera teacher and that goes and has a big career and then comes back to academia and teaches. And then we have teachers who have been teaching for many, many years. And so we have this conflict. And then in the last decade or 2 decades, we've had a further conflict between classical teachers and contemporary teachers. And now we have a better understanding of cross-training and all of that. So our field has changed so profoundly in the last 10, 20 years.
Yes.
So I was aware of that as well, Dan, to answer your question. I was, of course, aware of the contemporary, the need for us to continue to understand the specific needs of contemporary singers as well.
And you went to segue us into really that student-facing, student-focused application, which I think, in our industry, if I might, call it that, of singing teachers, and it's an industry that is, some have described it, and I probably am one of these people, as becoming rather toxic in recent years. But I think in part because we all too easily lose focus on being student focused and in appreciating, well, what is the student telling us that they want and need, as opposed to us imprinting upon them what we believe they should need. And that in part, comes into the world of vocal health as well. In me telling a student, well, you're only vocally healthy if you tick all these boxes, and said person might turn around and go, but I don't need to tick all those boxes and I don't feel unhealthy. And I know there's a limit to what I'm saying here, but I get that. I think that idea of maintaining the student goals and perspectives as a really prominent part of that trifold area is really important.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I know this was even brought home further to me during COVID, because my singers that had gigs all of a sudden, like all of us, were canceled. And many times that first March and April of 2020, the students would pop on for a lesson. Everybody, of course, was in shock. We were trying to find our way through. They were dejected and depressed, and they would pop onto a lesson, and time again, they would say to me, I almost canceled my lesson. I'm so glad I didn't. Thank you. This was so important to me. And I started calling them sound healing lessons. And so they would pop on and I'd be like, today is the sound healing lessons. And I think it was so significant too, as teachers, for us to rethink the importance of what is the importance of voice lessons, right? Yeah. There is such nourishment of people's souls that is at the core of why they continue to come and work with us. That is critical for us to consider. And who they are each week is a little different. Some weeks, maybe they need tough love. Some weeks, maybe they need empathy.
Yeah.
Right. Some weeks they need us to, give them inspiring ideas. Right. So our hat, that's one of my favorite things of teaching, is the different hat that I have to wear for the same student every week.
And what you're describing there is very much the art of what we do as teachers. It's the manner in which you're able to blend those, and I've just found the blending of the three, the voice research with the voice teacher expertise and experience, and the student goals. It's how we move and balance those, three areas, because as you say, the student at any given moment, one week will present with one set of life experiences, and the next week they're presenting with another. Case in point, in recent, in the last week, I had two lessons, one after the other, one in studio, one online. The online student rocked up. Her father had just passed away, but she was still intent in wanting to have her lesson because she wanted to have that sense of connection.
That's right.
The next student rocked up having in studio, and his sister is battling a very serious illness, and we sang as a part of the lesson, but we also needed to. It was appropriate to respond to what both individuals brought into the session, and I think so important as teachers that we always remember that. What do you think if we direct this to, and we will need to bring our discussion to an end soon, but how do we, if I was a student and I was listening to this, how can in one sense, how can a student manage us from below? How can a student, be a wonderful student in their approach, if we were to be really mindful of being student focused and student facing? What can a student do to apply themselves to the learning space more effectively?
What a great question. And I'm thinking, of my the Student Goals and Perspectives article that Lynn Helding and I wrote. But, I think honestly, it's our job. I'll reverse that question, because it's like, what can I do as a teacher to create a space in the first couple minutes of each lesson to listen to where the student is, to know a student well enough to ask a few questions about the voice. How's the voice been this week? What do you want to do with your lesson today? What were your takeaways from last lesson that you've been working on and might have follow-up questions for me? Or again, just reading their emotional state.
Yeah.
It's been a tough 2 years, and even longer here in the United States for different reasons politically, right? People are exhausted and weary. And so I think just them trusting that they can be safe with us, and that I can read them to know what they might need. And I've had to really soften over the years with that, because I used to think, but they're paying me for my expertise. And, and I'm a very driven woman, and I was raised by tough women, and my teachers were tough, right? There was no, you didn't cry in your lesson. You didn't ask questions, as I said earlier, right? You were there to get a job done.
Yeah.
And when you're at a top university, it is those teachers' jobs to prepare me for the real world, and nobody is going to accommodate you when this is your job, right? I'm talking about being a professional singer. But I think, the world is changing. We're learning more about cognitive science and what will motivate people to learn and how to get them to buy in. And so to answer your question, I think it's our job to create a space and an environment so that our students feel comfortable enough to say, hey, this is where I'm at this week, and here's what I need from you.
I wonder whether a word that we could apply would be to create an authentic space. A place where we as teachers can be real and where our students feel comfortable to be real, and
I love that.
And where we can be authentic together, appropriately, because we have to acknowledge we're not psychotherapists. We are singing teachers, and we choose to stay in our lane.
Scope of practice, yes.
But equally, it's so important. I think that I think students' voice. My observation of my students is the ones who seem to be to garner and gain the most from their sessions are not only active learners, but they're vulnerable learners. They come with a level of teachability that draws out of me more. I find I get, more is drawn out of me from those students. Yeah.
I love that. I think we're learning more about the ability to play in voice lessons.
Yes.
There are people that specialize in these presentations, and that's been so interesting and good for me to be around people that are like, oh, this is fun and we can play.
Yes.
But then I also think like you were to your point, just that ability to be vulnerable, and there has to be. I certainly would never have done that with my teachers by and large. There has to. One of my interns last year at the Nats master teacher, Lily Guerrero, talked about, instead of the term safe space, a brave space. I love that. And I always try and credit her because we used it a lot at that program, creating a brave space, whatever brave is for you on that given day. And some days, you know what, I've got students I've got one whose mother is nearing the end of the life with brain cancer, and she shows up every week with a smile on her face, and she's the primary caretaker. And I think the fact that she's shown up is a victory for me, and I tell her that every week. So a brave space for her might look different than somebody who's getting ready for a major audition.
And I think regardless, one of the key ingredients in a space being authentic or being a brave space, which I too love, is a development of trust between a student and a teacher, and that takes time, doesn't it? It takes time to develop that relationship, because it is a relationship, and every healthy relationship has a good measure of trust.
Absolutely. It's one of the greatest gifts that we can give our students, isn't it? Is that, being that person in their life that they can be authentic with, back to what you said. Yeah. It's a privilege. It is an absolute privilege.
Yeah, it really is. And it's been a privilege to talk with you today. I'll be honest and say I didn't think our conversation would arrive where it has, but I'm so pleased it did. And that's all come out of evidence-based voice pedagogy, which is pretty wonderful, because I think everyone gets really captivated by the voice science part of that equation. But
That's right.
You've got these other two really important factors that make up the holistic view
That's right.
of that. So I want to say a very special thank you, especially the way we kicked off today, which is, for those who are watching, was last week, because we had the technical challenges, but you stuck with me, which I very much appreciate. And is there anything that you wanted to leave us with? Any thoughts?
No, I just thank you so much for having me on your show. I, of course, have watched many, many of your shows, so it's very fun and thrilling to be here. And, I for those who are, might be getting my book or something, I hope that it's of use to people thinking systematically, and especially the kinesthetic singing tools that I have in there.
Yes.
I love talking about those. And so I hope people find them useful.
And in fact, that reminds me, in the what's it called? The description section of today's video, there is a special link that if you use the coupon code plural20, you get a 20% discount off, which is so generous of yourself and Plural Publishing to offer our viewers that option, which I really highly recommend everyone grab a copy
and
of
it
your
is
book.
available in an ebook as well.
Fantastic. Yeah.
So you don't have to pay for the shipping to Australia.
And there are so many practical tools in it. So it's not just for singing teachers, though. If you are a singing teacher and you're watching this, why is this book not on your shelf if it isn't? But beyond that, if you're a singing student and you're just wanting to, find other tools to experiment with, then Kari's book is just fantastic.
And Jen, sorry, I know we're signing off, but I just want to say that what the book is that's I feel different is there are over 100 vocal exercises in the book. Yeah. So you can't learn to sing by reading a book. And so I give a brief overview in every systematic chapter, of a little brief overview of the science of it, the takeaways, but the majority of each chapter are these vocal exercises that are described in detail of why that exercise is to do, what's it to do for you.
Yes.
And what are the cueing? What is the cueing for that exercise? And then there are videos online that you can watch of the exercise of one of my students performing it. So it really is for any singer, for anybody, advanced to beginner.
And I've read a lot of vocal pedagogy books. I've got a lot on my shelf, and I do love the accessibility that you've created in the way you've laid it out. So yeah, I really endorse that thought of the way you've done it all. It's fantastic.
Thank you so much.
But I do want to just finish off and say thank you so much for joining me on today's show. It has really been very wonderful to talk with you.
Thank you so much.
Well, there you go. I having watched that just then, I wonder why I don't do more pre-records, because the great joy for me was to be able to actually watch the show and learn so much. I mean, I got to be obviously a part of the conversation last week, but to have the opportunity to watch it again was just a rare privilege, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, as I hope you thoroughly enjoyed my chat with Dr. Kari. Isn't she delightful and so passionate about her teaching? Again, you can get this book, which is Dr. Kari Ragan's book, A Systematic Approach to Voice, through the links below. Plural Publishing have been kind enough to provide us with a 20% discount if you use the coupon code PLURAL20. And I highly recommend the book to you. I say that acknowledging I'm currently halfway through. I was reading some more again this morning, but it is wonderfully accessible, and I'm sure that you would enjoy the read. I have seen that there is a couple of questions jumping in there. We're not going to do Q&A today, but I want you to hold on to your questions. For those of you, if you're asking a question in the chat, and thank you for asking your questions, if you're not normally subscribed to the channel, then I want you to subscribe, hit the white bell icon, because then you will be notified in 2 weeks' time when we go live and we do a Q&A show, and I don't want you to miss out on that. In fact, I don't want you to miss out on any part of what we do here at Voice Essentials. We have at least one video goes live every week, but more often it's not than it's two. One live show, just like we're doing today, and then one pre-record video goes live every Wednesday. And so the way to get notified about that is to be subscribed. And so I hope you'll take the opportunity to do that. Again, a happy Father's Day to everyone who is celebrating that in the Northern Hemisphere. Hope you've had a fantastic day, and I really do look forward to catching you in 2 weeks' time when we'll start a new term of live shows. Hopefully, fingers crossed. I think I've figured out the tech issues. Certainly today's show went smoothly, but it's generally when we've got a live interview with a special guest. So hopefully I've figured it out, and we won't run into the same issues. The only way we'll find out is to jump in the deep end and have our live guest join us next term, which I hope you will also. And as always, you'll always hear me sign off every show by saying, I'm Dr. Dan, sing well.